Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome into a new edition of the Breakaway Bandits podcast here on the Sports Insanity Network, sponsored by the Dugout of Millwood. I am Mike Rifkin. Uh, Pretty big show because we are down to the final four in the Stanley Cup playoffs, the best playoffs in all of sports. We have the Western Conference Finals between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Colorado Avalanche. And we have an Eastern Conference Finals featuring the Carolina Hurricanes and the Montreal Canadiens, the Cinderella of you as the Cinderella, to quote March Madness, of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So we will preview both those matchups. We will also talk about the coaching changes across the National Hockey League. But we will start with the game tonight. Game one, Western Conference Finals, Vegas Golden Knights, Colorado Avalanche. This should be a true heavyweight bat. When you think about the star power for both teams, there will be one. You know what? There might be two stars out tonight. Cale Makar has officially been ruled out by the Avs for game one. It's been dealing with a little bit of a shoulder issue. That took place in the second round against the Minnesota Wild, who the Avs kind of decimated in 5 games to get to this point. But Colorado, look, you know they're deep. You know they're very good. Scott Wedgwood has had a really good playoffs for them in goal, which was the biggest question for the Colorado Avalanche. They're getting depth scoring. They are an elite hockey team. That's what they are, and they're running into a Vegas team um, that's been on quite a run themselves. Mark Stone skated this morning. They don't believe he's playing tonight, but that's a good sign. Hopeful for the series for Vegas as they're down their captain. So 2 stars probably not playing tonight, but listen, Vegas has been on a roll. They beat Anaheim in 6. And what was a fun series? Anaheim, great style of play throughout the playoffs. They play that brand of hockey that, you can't hate. They love to just go, 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 go. They don't defend well, but they like to go. Vegas has gotten a heck of a performance from a couple of players this playoffs. Mitch Marner, who is up there in scoring, probably would be the Conn Smythe favorite if Vegas were to win it all. He's been unbelievable. So that Toronto narrative really stung a little bit if you're a Leafs fan. Marner's been great. How about Brett Howden? Brett Howden has 8 goals, 9 goals in the playoff. He's been unreal. Scored a big shorthanded goal in game 6. And they're doing that, and they're getting these. Dorofeyev's been huge. By the way, he's an RFA. Now, if I'm a team out there looking for a young scoring winger, I would definitely throw an offer sheet that kid's way, just based on Vegas's cap situation. But they're doing this, and we talk about it. The stars usually have to be the stars, and Jack Eichel's had a good playoffs, but he hasn't had to be the guy, which is huge for Vegas that they have the depth around him. This is going to be an elite matchup. You got Eichel, you got Marner. I mentioned Dorofeyev, and the other side you get Marty Necas, Nathan McKinnon, Landeskog, Nichushkin. They're getting a lot out of guys like Parker Kelly, and Jack Drury's giving them some offense. This is going to be a great matchup. This does come down to 2 things. And it's the 2 things that most of the series come down to: special teams, goaltending. Carter Hart's had a pretty solid playoffs. As much as off the ice, you could say what you want about Carter Hart, but He's played well since coming to Vegas. He's had a good playoffs. Scott Wedgwood's been very good as well. And special teams. I'm very curious to see how the Colorado power play looks without Cale Makar. And Vegas's PK's been really good. So this is going to be a really interesting matchup. The teams, Colorado and Vegas, they went to overtime and a shootout. And two of their three meetings were decided in extra time. So that tells you all you need to know in this series. Mitch Marner had 4 points against the Avs this year, as did Thomas Hertl. Vegas had 10 different guys score a goal against Colorado. And then for Colorado, Nate just had 6 points. McKinnon, 4 points, only 1 goal. Brock Nelson had a goal. So we'll have to see. Brock Nelson's a guy I think the Avs are going to need in this series. He's going to have a performance. But this is going to be a fun series. The star power, both teams, how good they are and how well they've played. You got to give them both credit. Especially, Colorado, they steamrolled the Kings, and I don't like saying, but they did steamroll the Minnesota Wild 5 games. They were able to take it to them. So Colorado's there. Vegas did their thing against Anaheim in the second round. First round played a very competitive Utah Mammoth team. So this is going to be a really interesting series as we go into it. Again, special teams, goaltending. I do think home ice plays a major factor, as it usually does. This is going to be a long series. I think this one goes the distance. And I think home ice is going to prove to be a big difference. And I'm gonna take Colorado in 7. I love what Vegas has done under John Tortorella. I love what Vegas has on their roster. If Vegas, I don't even want to say if they could steal one of the first 2, because I do think they could split here in Colorado. I think if Vegas can find a way, I just don't know how they're going to stop Colorado. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though they beat Anaheim had quality opportunities. Colorado could take a lot from that. So both coaches have been here before. And listen, I know everyone's down on the Golden Knights right now because of the whole Bruce Cassidy situation, which we'll dive into when we get into the coaching situation. But for them, since their inception, this is the 5th time already they're in the conference finals. It's insane what they've done. But yeah, I like the Avs. I like the Avs in 7. And so we'll see what happens. Then we go to the East, and you've got a real interesting one here in the East, because I don't think anybody had the Montreal Canadiens in the Eastern Conference Finals, and how they've done it. They have played extremely well. They rebound very well off of losses, and they are a young team. By the way, this is the youngest Canadiens team since 1993. The last team from Canada to win the Stanley Cup, the 1993 Montreal Canadiens. Both have an average age of 25.8 years old. And they're getting it from everybody. They're getting offense from everybody. How about the series against the Buffalo Sabres for Alex Newhook? He was unreal. They unlocked Caulfield. They got Suzuki going. They got Uri Slavkovsky, Lane Hudson. Bolduc got a couple of goals that series. And this kid Dobish in goal. He's been unbelievable. Yeah, he was not great in game 6, but he rebounds in game 7. Uh, what Marty St. Louis has done with this team is really special. And they are so. And I'm going to do this again when I get into the coaching situation, specifically when I talk about the Leafs. Montreal's going to be they're going to get better because some of these kids haven't even hit their prime. Buffalo is going to get better. I know Nate's going to do something on the Sabres at some point. By the way, they just announced Lindy Ruff 2-year extension today. Congrats to him. But they're going to get better. Ottawa, we'll see what the Brady Tkachuk situation is, but Ottawa's very good. The Boston Bruins aren't going anywhere. The Florida Panthers are going to be healthy next year. Tampa's Tampa. Detroit is the one team you're just like, man, I don't know what they're going to do next year. So we'll get into that again when we get into the Leafs. But Montreal's had an unreal run. Their special teams have been phenomenal. Power play was really good in that series. Even when they didn't score, they were able to gain momentum because they had the puck the whole 2 minutes. And then Carolina, I mean, they steamrolled the Flyers, just like they steamrolled the first round against the Ottawa Senators. They're going to have, 11 days off in between games. Now, I think there is a benefit to that, though. This team has some older players. Jordan Stahl's an older player. Martinook, kind of an older player. Freddie Anderson is an older player. And the kind of style that Rod Brind'Amour wants them to play, I do think this rest for them is a little bit of a good thing. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to sweep the Canadiens. I mean, Montreal went 3-0 against them during the regular season, outscored them 15-8. But the biggest stat for me for that season series, Montreal 1 for 8 on the power play. It's a big stat, which means you're getting a lot of production 5-on-5 against Carolina. And we know what Carolina's game is. They like to play off the rush. They throw everything to the net. They could get a little physical and nasty. But you know the kind of game Carolina wants to play. And I think this is going to be the series because I think there's something Buffalo did. And I think to a degree Tampa Bay did this in the first round. You can get under the skin of Dobesh a little bit. Little bump here, little bump there. You can get to him. You can get under his skin by being in front of him. And if you play a big net front game, which Carolina likes to do, they like to throw guys to the net. That could spell trouble. But for Montreal, the line, we're usually talking about Svechnikov and Aho. The line for Carolina has been this Jackson Blake, Taylor Hall, Logan Stankoven line. That line's been phenomenal this playoffs. Hall's got 12 points. Stankoven's got 10 or 11 points. You know, Blake is scoring some big goals through them. You know, they're getting production. They get production from everybody. Now, the one thing I'm going to say about for Montreal, and I don't want to make this sound like this is an insult to Buffalo or Tampa Bay, but this is the best decor they're going to play. Tampa Bay was without Victor Hedman. Now, that's not an excuse, but that's a fact. Buffalo's decor plays a different style, the tempo wise. It's quick moving. Carolina likes the quick move too. Carolina's D could be a little bit more physical. When we're talking Jacob Slavin, who still is in my opinion, the most criminally underrated defenseman in the game, might be the most underrated player in the game. The addition of Keandre Miller has been massive for them over this playoff run. He has played extremely well. I hope Chris Drury is witnessing that. But I think for Carolina, Carolina's depth is going to provide a lot. Montreal's depth has already provided a lot. But I'm interested to see how, when you look into games 3 and 4, when we go to Montreal, how is Montreal going to deploy Suzuki? How are they going to deploy certain guys? What's the matchup Marty St. Louis is looking for? Because I'm going to presume for Rod Brind'Amour, it's going to be Jordan Staal out there against Suzuki for Carolina. So we'll have to see how that kind of works out. But Montreal's been on a phenomenal run. They've been awesome. I don't want to pick against them. But Carolina's in the Eastern Conference Final for a 4th straight year. If they don't get it this year, I don't know when they'll ever do it. I'm going to take the Canes. I'm going to take the Canes in 6. I think this will be a tightly played series. If Montreal can find a way to utilize their speed throughout this series, Carolina's in trouble. That's the one thing about Montreal. They are fast, very fast. And if they can but if Carolina, they're big, they can play nasty. If they can get under the skin of Dobesh, which I think they can, and I think they will, I like Carolina. Especially because they were able to contain that Montreal power play. Carolina was 4 for 8 in that season series. Carolina's special teams, very good. So I do think we're on that collision course of Avs Hurricanes, which should be the Stanley Cup final titled the Natural Disaster Cup. But we'll see what happens. And NHL, if you're going to use that, I'm getting it. I'm getting a little bit. All right, so Avs Canes is my prediction. Now we're going to dive into some of the other news around the league. Let's start with the coaching changes. I'm going to start with the most recent one, which was yesterday. The Canucks announced that Adam Foote was not coming back, along with his assistant coaches. It was also announced today Patrick Alvin's not coming back. Jim Rutherford's already stepping down. They did hire Ryan Johnson to be the new GM. He was, I believe, the Abbotsford GM, so the minor league GM. So they wanted to promote him. When I look at Vancouver and I look at Adam Foote, I feel bad for Adam Foote in this why. Nobody was going to succeed with the Canucks this year because the ignorance of the organization. And when I say ignorance, I don't mean it as you know what? No, I'm going to keep it as ignorance because they felt the only moves to make were we get rid of JT Miller, we get rid of Rick Tocchet, and we can unleash some of these other guys. Well, you had to trade Quinn Hughes in December. Okay. Quinn Hughes had to get traded in December. You got the equivalent of 4 first-round picks when you talk about where players were drafted and they got a Minnesota's first, I think, this year. But now you're still locked in with guys like Pettersson and Besser and DeBrusk and Connor Garland, who they wound up moving at the deadline to Columbus. Now you have to move off of some of these other guys. And I remember the trade deadline reading, they wanted teams to retain, or they didn't want to retain on Pettersson at the money he makes, which was it 11.5 or something? Let me double check that. Uh, yeah, 11.6, and he signed through 2032. Now, for Patterson, you would be trading him at a low value, which does suck for you. But at the same time, he's 27 years old. And as much as I would hate giving up on a 27-year-old, I just don't know how many coaches, excuse me, you feel are going to be able to unlock him. And is he ever going to get back to form? And if we're going to ask this every year, do you even want to try it? That's going to be a question here. I think you have to move Brock Besser. I didn't even think you were going to resign Brock Besser. But again, you did it because you thought you could help that retain Quinn Hughes, and that didn't work. So now you have to move off of Besser. You have to find a way out of that contract. You're probably going to have to retain on it. Find a way out of Jake DeBrusk. You may have to retain on it. The Canucks need to figure this thing out. And the biggest question mark for me on the Vancouver Canucks, the health of Thatcher Demko. If Thatcher Demko is a healthy goalie in the National Hockey League, he's a top 10 to maybe a top 8 goalie in the league when he's on and he's right and he's healthy. He just hasn't been right or healthy. They have to change a lot of the aspects here. So it's going to be unfair to anybody, whether it was Adam Foote, bringing back Alain Vigneault, or you or me coaching in Vancouver last year. You just weren't going to be able to reset this whole thing in a year. Now they've realized that was a problem. Now they have to reset this culture. This isn't a guy. You can't bring in a guy. I'm going to use Bruce Cassidy as the example here. You can't bring in Bruce Cassidy and be like, we want to make the playoffs. Do you have the talent to do it? Sure. That shouldn't be the Canuck plan. The Canucks plan should be reset everything. And it may take a few years. And that's why you have to get out of some of these bad contracts you have. But it's frustrating. But at the end of the day, if you're the Canucks, right now would be a perfect time to start a rebuild. Here's why. Look at the Pacific for a second. Edmonton. They have 1 year left of Connor. We'll get into them in a second. The Ducks are good and they're on the rise. They're young. Vegas is Vegas. So, right there, those are the top three. The Kings, they have players. They have good, young, solid players. Where they're going to go, I don't know. San Jose might be the most fun team to watch in the damn league. So now, and then there's the Kraken who, as we say every year, they need more offense, but it's a whole nother conversation. If you're the Canucks, I would be okay with saying, okay, we're in a decent spot. Let's rebuild this thing a little bit. That's why I think Manny Malhotra is their guy. And then at 3, they could take his son. I just don't get the sense you go with a big time experienced coach here. I would go the Canadians route, hire Manny Malhotra, and what the Canadians are doing with Marty St. Louis, let the players grow with that young coach. But Vancouver's a mess. Like that is a messy situation. That is not going to be a 1 year, we're back. That is a 2-3 year job to reset everything. Then there's the Oilers, who fired Chris Knobloch. And by the way, they did it very disrespectfully in the sense of calling about the availability of Bruce Cassidy before even firing Knobloch. It's a whole nother conversation. But that was rude. I know there were people who are like, well, Chris Knobloch never adjusted or didn't do this right. I don't blame Chris Knobloch for the Oilers' failures this year. I don't blame Connor McDavid for the Oiler failures this year. I blame Stan Bowman. And I think we'll come to the point where at those end of the year meetings where Draisaitl and McDavid basically called out the organization, we need help. We need more. The Oilers need a lot of help. I know there's a lot of people who are going to roll their eyes to that. They do. They need a goalie. The Tristan Jarry experiment did not work. So you got to bring back Connor Ingram, and then you got to find a real number one goalie, which isn't going to be easy, especially when you don't have draft capital or prospects to move. So what are you going to do? You got to revamp the blue line a little bit. And then you got to me, the guy who the Oilers are missing all year, and this is going to sound insane, but the guy they missed was Evander Kane. How many times in games over the years for Evander Kane? Yes, he would take stupid penalties. But how many big goals did Evander Kane score for the Edmonton Oilers in the playoffs? A lot. He would get under other teams' skin. They needed an Evander Kane, and they don't have one. They got rid of him. Whether they felt that was a cap dump, whether they felt it was this, they felt like moving off. So how are you going to piece together this roster? That's the next question. Goalie is a need. Changes on the back end is a need. Okay. That's the problem here with the Oilers. They've been so McDrysaddle heavy over the years that they need to figure some other things out. You know, RNH is another year older. He's getting another coach. Could they potentially move a Hyman, who I believe doesn't have a full trade anymore? So you can move Hyman if you wanted to. Stan Bowman, I don't think there's a person with more pressure on them this summer than Stan Bowman. Because if you fail next year and 97's like, yeah, I'm not coming back. I don't want to come back. Trade me now. And then what happens if Draisaitl follows suit and says, I don't want to be here. If Connor's leaving, I'm leaving. And you would have wasted this whole decade with McDrysaddle, and you'd have nothing to show for it. Yes, you would have 2 appearances in the Cup final. Great. How many cups did you get? Stan Bowman, the pressure's on. And it's not like they have $20, $30 million cap space. I think they have around $16 million. And I hated how they handled the Knobloch thing. Excuse me. Hated it. So who should come in to coach the Oilers? Well, they've called about Bruce Cassidy. The Golden Knights said, yeah, we're denying that. Which I don't think it's cool the Golden Knights to do that, but I understand it from the perspective of him being your former coach. You don't want him to go to a division rival. Or if Kelly McCrimmon said you're just so focused on the playoffs, well, then you should have really just said yes, but that's a whole nother conversation. So could they go that route? Could they go the Craig Berube route? Could they go the Peter Laviolette route? I think Laviolette would be an interesting guy, in my opinion. I think that would be the guy for me because I think if you need a reset, and by reset I mean this: if you lose this year and Connor wants out, I think Peter Laviolette can steer you off the reset. I'm not sure Craig Berube could do that or would do that. Bruce Cassidy could probably do that too. But we'll have to see if you ever get the permission to talk to him. But that's the Oilers. And then there's the Leafs who fired Craig Berube. Um, Interesting offseason for the Leafs. They won the draft lottery. They fired their coach. We're still waiting on a decision on the Austin Matthews situation. We'll get into that in a second here. But look, if you're the Leafs, the Leafs need a younger coach. I don't think the Leafs should be, and I will probably be despised entirely when I say this. I don't think if you're the Leafs, you could sit there and go, okay, whoever we hire, we say we're going to be contending for the cup next year. You want to sit there and say we want to contend for the playoffs? I'll give that to you. I don't love that, to be honest with you. And here's why I don't love that idea. Because of the firing of Berube, this team has gone through Mike Babcock, Sheldon Keefe, and Craig Berube. That's 3 coaches. They're going to get a 4th coach. How many nucleuses in hockey get a 4th head coach? It's not many. It's not many. And it's not like this group has earned it. They've won 2 playoff series. And we act like they're perennial cup winners. They're not. They haven't won a damn thing. And every punching bag has now left that organization. Kyle Dubas, who was a big punching bag for Leaf fans, he's not here. Guess what? He's killing it up in Pittsburgh. Mitch Marner was a punching bag for Leaf fans. Guess what? He's a Conn Smythe contender for Vegas. Brendan Shanahan was a punching bag. He's just not there anymore. This is why the Matthews situation is interesting. Because whether Matthews is in or out doesn't make a difference to me. Because if Matthews is in it for the long haul, they still need to reset our other pieces. It's not like, oh, Austin's coming back. Great. We're going to do big things. And if Austin's like, no, I'm not coming back. Well, then guess what that says? If Austin says, no, I'm not coming back, that accelerates your rebuild instead of it becoming a retool, because you could trade Matthews. You could trade William Nylander. I wouldn't trade Matthew Nyes just because he's 23. He makes a decent salary. That's a guy you could build around. But the thing for the Leafs is this, too. You could trade Matthews. You could trade Nylander. You could trade Morgan Riley, which to me looks more like a cap dump than anything else. But what about guys like Oliver Ekman-Larsson? Do you think you can get a couple draft picks for Oliver Ekman-Larsson? Maybe. And then it's smart financial stuff that's going to have to work out. Like, I think Darren Dreger said they had interest in Vincent Trocheck from the Rangers. Okay. As a Ranger fan, what am I getting back from the Leafs? Because they don't have prospects. They don't have draft picks. And outside of Matthew Nyes, they really don't have young players I want. Now, if you're going to tell me I'm going to do a Vincent Trocheck for Max Domi swap, I'm out on that deal because I want nothing to do with Max Domi. Not because he's a bad player. I'd rather just keep Vincent Trocheck because he's better, even though he's an older player. I'd rather trade Trocheck to a team willing to give me more than Max Domi. I have no interest in that deal. But for the Leafs to sit here, and I know people are talking about David Carl, the coach from Denver. There's another name that I want thrown out there. I read it the other day, but I think I threw it to Nate in a text message. The guy who interests me the most, if I'm a Leaf fan, is not David Carl. The guy who intrigues me the most is Jay Woodcroft, the former Oiler coach, Jay Woodcroft. That's the guy for me. He coached McDavid. He just won a playoff series against McDavid. He was an assistant for Anaheim. Players respond to him. I would hire Jay Woodcroft in a second. That's, to me, that's the guy. I don't. You want David Carl, go get him. But to me, I would look at Jay Woodcroft. That to me would be where the Leafs go. And as for Matthews, look, I'm going to sit here and say this on Austin Matthews. Either way, whether he's back or not, the Leafs are not contending for the Stanley Cup at 27. Matthews being back accelerates their contention for the Cup. If I was John Shaika, and I'm not, I would go to Keith Pelly tomorrow. And I would say, the way we can end our horror, and I mean horror, we won 2 playoff series. We may have to move Austin. And I want to get it done now as opposed to next summer where he'll dictate everything. I want him to give me a list of 3 or 4 teams that he's willing to go to. I will make said deal with said team. He can pick where he wants to go. And we are going to erase the idea of the Shannon plan because it didn't work. Just like in basketball, the process didn't work in Philadelphia. The Shannon plan never worked in Toronto. And it's time to get out of it. And if you want to be a proactive general manager, you get rid of him now. It's going to hurt Leaf fans. It would hurt. But I think the idea here is that you got to figure a way out. Otherwise, you're just running back the same nonsense over and over and over again. Definition of insanity. Speaking of which, that'll do for this edition of the Breakaway Bandits podcast here on the Sports Insanity Network. Like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications here on the YouTube page. Go to the website, thesportsinsanitynetwork.com for great blogs, vlogs, planes, trains, and automobiles. Follow the socials. Facebook, Sports Insanity Network. Twitter, S Insanity Real. You can follow me personally on Twitter, Punmaster Rifkin. Same name on Blue Sky. Everyone enjoy the conference finals starting tonight. We'll keep you updated with news. I know Nate is going to want to do a Sabres recap at some point, so stay tuned for that. But everyone enjoy the conference finals. Thanks for tuning into this edition of the Breakaway Bandits podcast, sponsored by the Dugout of Millwood here on the Sports Insanity Network. I am Mike Rifkin, signing off.